Sometimes something like this is just too small for your cooking needs of the outdoors or in an emergency. And that's when you need something like that. This is the Housweety Lightweight Large Burner. Alright everybody, welcome back. Now, one of the things I've discovered when messing around with different size pots and pans is that sometimes a small burner is actually a real disadvantage. Now, when you're backpacking and you want really lightweight stuff, it's awesome, especially if all your meals are freeze-dried and all you're going to do is be boiling water. A small little guy like, say, the Lixada, or this little titanium stove here that weighs 25 grams, that's awesome. But here's where you run into a problem. You actually want to cook something and you want to use a pan. And you can see how little space, let me get that on there right, there's not a lot of surface area for that, and it's going to be floating around and falling off or dropping to the ground or whatever. And it's going to be a balancing act every time you put it on there because you're trying to hold it on. That's where a larger burner comes in handy. Now, not only that, but we always talk about the tiniest little size possible for things and making our bug out bags light, but we don't discuss bugging in during a disaster, and that's probably what 98% of us are going to be doing during a disaster or emergency, bugging in. What makes more sense, to have a tiny little burner that you're not comfortable with using, or something similar to your stove? So, this is by a company called Housweety. Where they get these names from, I have no idea. It's Housweety. Housweety. So, it's actually a pretty cool burner. I've only fired it up. I haven't done anything on it yet. I've only fired it up to see how it works. But it's got a nice big surface area. And these legs fold out for even a bigger surface area. So if you're at home, okay, and the power's out, or there's a storm coming and the power's been knocked out, whatever, and you run on we're all electric here, so when the power goes out, we don't have a way to cook. At least we didn't until I started getting all these stoves. But something like this is more like your burner, more like your regular burner that you're used to, your gas burner. So you're not only going to be a little more familiar with it, but it's going to cook things normally. Instead of burning the center of a little pan with a little tiny heat area and it not spreading evenly all over the pan and burning your food and it being more difficult to cook. Now, for my test today, we are going to try boiling water with this. And you'll notice it's in two pieces. This piece is separate from this. It folds up like that. So you unfold it, turn it on the bottom, screw it into place, and make sure that's fully closed. And there you go. You're all set. The nice part about this is these go out a long way, but it doesn't just limit you to using a large pan. You can also use a small one because you have these little inserts and brackets here too. So what we're going to use today, my Stanley coffee press, will fit in there perfectly. So the burner itself weighs 9.6 ounces. That's a little heavy for a backpacking stove, but let's face it, you know what you're buying here. You might be buying this for your home use for an emergency. It breaks down into a nice little case, like I showed you here. The interesting thing about this case, I suspect it was either used or made of recycled materials because it is absolutely filthy inside. So I'll probably have to wipe that out. I don't know if it's dirt or manufacturing dust or whatever, but that's the only downside I've had. It does have a loop for a belt if you're going to wear this on your belt, in case you're one of those people that needs to carry a stove around with you 24/7. But it is kind of a cool item. Now you got to remember, a larger burner is going to use more fuel. So when you're storing your fuel, let's say your isobutane, you want to remember that. Whereas my little tiny burner, I may only store one of those. Even for a trip, I may take one with me. Something like that, maybe I'd take two. It's always going to use a little bit more because it's a bigger stove. It allows for cooking things like pancakes, hamburgers, anything you can do on a skillet, something you really can't do with like a pocket rocket. And that's one of the nice points about it too. If you're going out camping and you know what your menu is going to be, let's say you're going to have eggs and pancakes for your breakfast every morning. Well, maybe you want something like that because you're not going to be cooking pancakes in a little tiny camp pot. You're going to be cooking them in like this little titanium pot here. So maybe that's what you want. So let me screw it together, get it all set up. We're going to do a boil test on it. I want to see how long it takes to boil 2 cups of water. And then, of course, I'll use that water to make some coffee. I haven't filled it all the way up to the fill line because I'm just making 2 cups and I want to do the test with 2 cups of water. So let me back up and I'll bring you back when it's ready to go. All right, so we're all set up, and that's what it'll look like. You don't need to leave these out. You can flip them all in. I'm going to take them out just for my use today because this isn't as big as a pan. But let's give you an example here. Here's this titanium pan. That sits on there, no problem whatsoever. So I like a bigger burner. Definitely starting to like them, especially for a bug-in situation where you're stuck in your house and you're cooking. Again, more familiar with what the type of burner you're using. You're not using a little tiny burner that's going to burn everything in the center and everything else will be cold. And it's just easier to use with your home pans already that you might have, the stuff you have at home that you use every day for cooking. Another side note, if you want to use this, say, on a larger scale, it can be used with these. Again, I have that adapter. Who's this from? It says G-Bell Camp, but I believe I bought this from Lixada. And it just screws on the top here, and you screw your Lindell valve on top there, and you're good to go. So, when I said it uses more fuel, one of these will definitely get you through a good long time with a burner like that. Plus, it also gives you a little more height, so it's more where you're used to cooking instead of cooking down, a little tiny burner. So, that's just a side note. There we go. That's up. Is that viewable in the camera? I never seem to remember to make sure that the stopwatch is viewable in the camera. And that's perfect. That actually fits right inside the little spots where these little edges fold over, the little flanges. So it does not have a piezo igniter, so you're going to have to light it yourself. That's not a big deal. Honestly, I find those piezo igniters to be a little annoying because they tend to work for like a month and then they stop working. So they're kind of annoying. Then they're just extra weight. Now, as you can see here, I'm not going to start timing yet. That thing can really turn up. We're going to turn it up like that and start the timer and not burn my hand off. There you go. And I will bring you back when it's boiling. I'm not going to bother you bringing you back in between a bunch of times. And we'll see how long it takes. All right, I guess we can call that a boil at 2 minutes and 29 seconds. Let me turn that off. Not up, off. So that's fairly fast enough. That's really, really quick. We rock the camera back down and carefully put this here so I don't spill it. So anyway, that's the story on this. 2 minutes and, well, let's say 20 seconds because it took me about 9 seconds to get the thing off. But, I mean, that's not bad for a burner. I mean, that's a decent sized burner. Did an awesome job on that really quick. I'm going to pour some coffee in there and make myself some coffee. If you guys are wondering, I did a review on this coffee press a while back. It's Stanley's new coffee press. Works really, really well. Really kind of neat. I'm just going to let it sit there and kind of steep a bit. Anyway, these run, let me get that out of the way. These run about $13, I'm sorry. $13. I mean, they're cheap enough where you could afford to buy a couple, keep a couple around, and like I said, if you're not thinking about using it for a bug out bag, if you already have a stove for a bug out bag and you're thinking about using something like that for, a bug in scenario, you can't beat it. That's pretty darn cool. And a really, really fast boil time, nice evenly dispersed heat as opposed to trying to make, pancakes on something like that where it's going to be burning the heck out of the center and the rest is going to be going everywhere. Don't get me wrong, these are awesome stoves, but they work better in situations where you're making kind of soups or heating food up or making water for dehydrated food. That and they're awesome. And I have this in my bug out bag. I have one of these in my bug out bag. These are the BRS titanium stoves, by the way. They're really cheap. They're like $12, $13, and they're really, really light. 25 grams, I believe. So they're good, but again, it's about certain uses for certain objects. And something like that definitely fits a bill for somebody who maybe wants a small emergency kit in their house where it's like you got backup power, backup way to cook, a little bit of food, a little bit of water. Maybe you live in an apartment. Now, if you're going to use these indoors, remember, you don't want to have too much CO2 building up in your house. So use them in a well-ventilated area. If you have a patio, if you have a porch, if you have a situation like my kitchen where I have an incredibly high ceiling and I have a screened-in patio right off it that I can open the door to, then you're fine. But to take this in a closet and use it in a little confined space for hours on end, you're going to get too much CO2. And I always tell especially preppers, to have a CO2 monitor. I have one in here and one in my house in a couple of different rooms, so it definitely is definitely something handy and definitely something you want to keep an eye on. So that is the Housweety lightweight large burner. I'm going to put a link down below where you can pick it up. Like I said, they're 13 bucks. They're $12.79. You really can't beat that. You can buy a couple of these, stash them away in your emergency kit for, say, home use. Even stash one away in your bug-out bag. I mean, really, it's 9.6 ounces. You know, unless you're doing some kind of Appalachian Trail hike for weeks on end, that's not that bad. Personally, I wouldn't mind having a big one and a small one in my bag. This way, if I'm just doing water on the go quickly, I can put it down, boil some water, take it back up, and get back on the move. And if I've stopped to cook something maybe I've caught, maybe something I've trapped, maybe something that I have in my bag that I want to cook, I can use that and a pan. So, that's the burner. I hope you enjoyed the video today. Don't forget to check out our Amazon store down below. I always let you guys know. Pretty much everything I review, I try to put in my Amazon store. This will be in it as well as this. So check them out. And don't forget to check out our Thrive Life link down below. If you're interested in getting started on some freeze-dried food, that's definitely the way to go. Anyway, I'm going to have my coffee. So thank you for watching. Stay safe and stay prepared.